So,
Mhm.
okay, and I think Linn is now the meeting is now being recorded, so I think we can begin. So,
John, can you restate that you are going to chair the meeting until James Manning arrives for the record?
actually, I believe for the record, my understanding was that Councillor Baumgartner was going to temporarily chair it.
Oh,
until
okay.
James arrives.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm sorry, John. I was saying that
Oh.
I
I
if
can
you
do
need
that.
a
Oh,
motion
absolutely.
for you
Okay.
to do it,
No,
I'll make
I-
one.
I-
Otherwise, I'm happy for you to do it, and I think other people would be too.
okay.
That would be appropriate.
okay. Well, I can certainly do that. No, thank you, Councillor. I misunderstood you there. So, okay. Well, until James arrives, I will do that. So I'm going to. So for the record, I'm temporarily assuming the interim chair position until Mr. Manning arrives. So I'm going to call the meeting to order and then do a roll call vote. So just really fast. So we pull up my list. Councillor Groner.
Here.
Councillor Baumgartner.
Here,
Tom Watton. Tom is present. Oh, looks like James Manning's has just arrived. I'm going to finish the roll call vote. So, Kathy Hallecky,
Here.
Bob McCarthy. Don't see him. Bailey Bogus, not present. Not Julie Hernandez. No. Kyle.
Here.
Kyle, I've forgotten your last name.
It's Anderson.
Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you.
With an A. Yes.
Yeah, for the record, Kyle is replacing Kevin Johnson as representative of Belgravia. So,
Yes. Thank you.
also of GBD Architects.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Andrew Mason. No. John George. No, I spoke to him yesterday, so I think he'll probably arrive here shortly. Britta Mansfield.
Here.
Thank you. Jim Edwards. Oh, there you are. I see you waving. Thank you. Bob Schultz. Nope, not seeing Bob. Chris Boston. Nope. Caroline Nielsen. She's our new youth advisory member. So no. Jeff Cohn.
Yes, I'm here.
Oh, yep. Thank you. There you are. Greg Smith. I saw you there earlier. Yep. And Josh Carter. Okay, so I think we have yeah, we have 8 members present, so I think we can begin. So I think with
John, can I interrupt one moment?
yes.
To remind everyone that if you're not talking, please put yourself on mute because we have a lot of interference and rustling and stuff, and it's just distracts. So please remember that best practice. Thank you.
Oh, and then also too, we have our consultants present as well. So I'll just call it Adrian Witt and the Anjou Palta. So thank you. So okay, and then with that, James, I'll turn it over to you. I think we're the next item is approval of meeting minutes from last time.
Yes, thank you, John. Sorry, I'm late to the meeting. So could I get a motion to approve the meeting minutes from our last meeting?
so moved.
I have a correction.
Oh.
Kathy has a correction.
Can we
Go ahead.
second and then get the correction?
I second.
All in favor?
I.
Well, we should discuss the correction
Oh, okay.
first, I think.
Okay, go ahead.
It's a minor one. My name is misspelled. There's an E at the end of Kathy. It's IE.
Okay, well, great. I think the next item would be presentation and discussion of the draft community vision plan. So Chair Manning, if you're okay, the consultant's ready to sort of jump into the item, I believe. So
Yes, thank you.
Great, thank you both.
I'm sorry to
Sorry.
interrupt before you start. Can everyone mute, please? I'm having some interference. Thank you.
Great. So last time we met about a month ago, we walked through the first couple of sections of our draft community vision plan, the background and introduction section, and what was called the development framework is now called the planning framework. Appreciate everyone who provided comments either in the meeting or as a follow-up to that meeting. We've incorporated those comments into those sections and expanded out the document to include two other sections, market analysis and the concept plans for each district. So we wanted to use our agenda item today to, Anju's going to walk through the draft vision plan that was sent out in advance of this meeting. And then I'll just spend a few minutes right at the end of that to talk through our sort of next steps, which are around public engagement. And I'll talk a little bit about sort of the intent of this first phase of public engagement, what we're looking for in terms of public feedback on this draft vision, and then who and how we're going to outreach to those folks. So maybe with that, Anju, I'll hand it over to you to walk us through the draft vision plan.
Sounds good. Can everybody hear me okay? Great. All right, let me share my screen. All right, and can everybody see a window with a few blue squares on it and photos?
Yeah, we've got you.
Okay, good. Sorry, I'm just not super used to WebEx. Now I lost everybody's faces. Okay, we're back. All right, so before we kind of jump into the document, I just want to mention that, you know, we're going to go through a lot today and we're going to go through it pretty quickly. And we certainly don't expect you to be able to sort of absorb or react to everything you see kind of in real time. So a reminder, you know, you will be getting this entire document to review over the next week on your own time, at your own pace. And we're asking back for those consolidated comments in about a week. So by next Thursday. So yeah, with that, I'll just kind of remind you all of the overall structure that Adrian just talked about of the report. But now we have like a little bit of a visual to look at. Document is 4 separate sections: project introduction, planning framework, market analysis, and district planning. When we met in November, we spent time reviewing the introduction and planning framework section. Those are the pieces that you've received so far to review. And we'll spend a little bit of time reviewing and going over updates that we've made to the planning framework. But we'd really like to spend the majority of the time reviewing the new content in chapters 3, 3, and 4. So with that, let's jump into the planning framework. And I'm going to do, again, just a little bit of a recap. And as we go through these pages, I'll point out some of the kind of key updates that we've made to this section from the last time you've seen it. So the planning framework, again, is kind of organized around key public realm features, including circulation elements, natural features, and cultural assets and historic sites, among others. The framework includes an assessment of existing ownership and land use designations, as well as considerations for planning in the floodplain and for steep slopes, which we all know are sort of defining characteristics of the site and some real constraints that we need to work within. This section also introduces some foundational, again, public realm features for the waterfront, including a reimagined Willamette Falls Drive as a multimodal greenway, as well as a new waterfront trail. Suggestions for improved site access and new waterfront gateways. So you see on the left side of the screen, we've updated this page slightly to really kind of emphasize that the success of the waterfront and new development on the waterfront is going to really be reliant on how well the waterfront is connected to the rest of the city. So that's going to mean finding opportunities for more linkages and connection points to our site, particularly to the south end and the Pond Redevelopment District, as well as potentially even across I-205. The right is also a new page we've added on the right side here, which is an assessment of shoreline access and conditions. And we thought this was kind of a critical piece we were missing originally because it really provides some thinking on where we might locate waterfront entry points and where waterfront programming might be feasible. And potentially how the trail, our conceptual trail alignment should respond to some of these existing shoreline conditions. Natural assets and historic assets are identified and described as really needing to be preserved and elevated as part of any new planning or development processes take place. It's important to mention here that we'll be following up and contacting some of you to discuss the mapping of some of the indigenous and tribal sites on the cultural and historic page here. We just really want to ensure accuracy and sensitivity and sort of determining what should and should not be highlighted here. So there will be some follow-ups regarding that page. View corridors, another new page that has been added since the last time you saw this document. Here we're showing existing views, really that should be leveraged and built upon as part of new development. Also an opportunity here to think about the kinds of views and sort of experiential qualities provided by the views. That again should be factored into the planning and potential alignment of the waterfront trail. So kind of thinking about all of these things together at once and how they can all build off of one another. Geographic zones, making the most of unique landforms of the site, working with the topography and really emphasizing the need to minimize environmental impact on the site and sort of excavation. So all of that builds up to the planning framework where all of these considerations are mapped visually onto the site. And then we've elaborated upon them by district on the right in bullet point format. So these bullet points have been fleshed out a little bit more. So definitely when you get the document, take another look at these, see if we're missing anything. And yeah, let us know. So that was kind of a super brief overview of the updated planning framework. I want to stop and pause for any questions here before we move on.
I had a question about the pond that is closest to the falls. The ones on the old Publisher Pond site that Blue Heron used are no longer being used, but my sense is that the one that's closest to the falls is. And so is that site in fact available for different kinds of development? What's its current disposition and what are plans for it in the future?
Adrian, do you want me to take on that one?
Yeah,
Okay.
I can jump on that. I don't have the answer completely, but we have had some interviews with stakeholders, some of which are represented on this call, around the use of that pond. And John, tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think that currently that's tied to the operations of the paper mill at the moment.
I believe so. It is, yes. So that
Yeah.
I can confirm that later. I can't speak definitively. But yeah, my understanding is that yes, it's still under operation. So.
Yeah. So as to availability, no, not right now. But subject to what happens with the operations in the future of that paper mill, that would be the constraining, or that would be the time limit on that site, essentially, plus any remediation beyond that.
And I also had a question that I raised in my comments, but wasn't clearly kind of addressed in the revision of the plan. And that has to do with the width of Willamette Falls Drive and whether it would actually be able to accept the kind of multimodal vision that you're looking at without significant engineering intervention.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm sure John can also add on to the response to this, but my understanding is that the concept plan that is adopted into the TSP does need to still go through, obviously, more detailed design to confirm the exact alignment and the ability to achieve that within the topography, the geology, and the cost constraints of that future project. At the moment, there's no funding for that project, so that design stage hasn't been undertaken, but would need to be.
Great, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I'll just also add in the most recent conceptual plan for that corridor, there are sections that show what the configuration of that corridor looks like in the more constrained sections versus the sections that are less constrained. So there has been some initial thinking about limiting factors. Any other questions?
I have one, Angela. Is this on the historic City Hall district? Is this kind of inventory of what's being used there right now, or is this a vision of what was being proposed?
This is what you see on the screen here. If you see, are you talking about inventory of buildings?
Yeah, I mean, it says commercial and single family. So does that open itself for mixed use? Or maybe is that more of a vision statement that's later on?
It's more of a vision statement that's later on, and we'll certainly be getting into that. But I will say that the little red building outlines you see here are actually historic buildings with a historic designation that should be considered as part of future plans.
Cool, great, thank you.
Yeah.
So I've been here. There are a couple of hands raised, I believe, by Jim Edwards and Mary Baumgartner. So.
Go ahead, Jim.
I think Jim is on mute. We can't hear you.
Okay. Well, I'm saying that I had a number of comments on the material that Angela just went through, but I think I will put those in writing rather than take everyone's time to go through the specific items. So I just want to reserve my opportunity to comment.
Great. Mary, did you want to go next?
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to ask, at what point would it be appropriate to discuss the possibility of getting cleanup funding and or conservation type funding, and how would that potentially influence our visioning? Because it seems like this area would be potentially a good fit for getting some kind of help with the development, restoration, conservation efforts that we're talking about here.
Yeah, I
Thank
think
you.
that's a great question. So I think, I guess further to the question that was raised before around, what's currently, that at least that pond is currently under use and would need that amelioration. Like we know that as a constraint to the site. We do have a later phase once we go through sort of this visioning exercise. A later phase of the project will actually start to look at how to implement, and we'll start to look at potential funding sources for doing some of those things, like, for example, being able to ameliorate that pond and create it into something else.
Thank you. And I also would extend that question to the Blue Heron Lagoon as well, and that the wetland area, not just specifically the pond that the West Linn side mill is using currently. Just to be clear for the record. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none and no hands raised, I will move on. We are going to look in a little bit more detail at the market analysis. So a little bit of background. Over the last few months, our economic advisors who are on kind of part of our larger consultant team, Linn Consulting Group, have been working on a comprehensive market analysis that really kind of takes into account at a high level national and local trends, and then at a kind of more macro level also looked at current and near-term market conditions of West Linn, nearby areas, and the waterfront sites themselves. The team used primarily CoStar data and reports from the Urban Land Institute, among others, to generate the analysis. And ultimately, what this analysis does for us is it gets us to understand the feasibility of different programs and land uses for the site that can actually potentially be accommodated on the site and are really feasible. So this was like a kind of comprehensive analysis that's been boiled down to kind of the key findings on the next couple pages. So that's what I'm going to overview now, is sort of the key findings by different program areas. So this is likely too small to read the bullet points, but again, you'll get this document and be able to review it in more detail. But at a high level, let's start with housing. So multifamily housing is in high demand throughout the Portland metro area and offers the opportunity to support other uses that might go along the waterfront, like retail or light flex industrial or maker spaces. One huge constraint is the floodplain, which makes this site not really ideal for housing, or a lot, areas of the site that are in the floodplain not ideal for housing. However, as a team, we've talked about the potential for housing combined potentially with ground floor retail in floodplain areas, and that being potentially a feasible option. But another challenge here is really making sure that any new housing is balanced and takes into account the need to maintain public access to the river. So that's housing. Retail, small format destination retail, things like restaurants or recreation-based businesses that really elevate the experience of being on the riverfront and take advantage of the waterfall views are likely feasible. And also, again, in conjunction with other uses rather than standalone. Office, due to the rise from work from home, this is true across the country. Yeah, go ahead, Jeff.
I'm sorry, I was waving at someone who just walked in the door who I haven't seen for a week.
I got it. I thought you were waving at me. Okay, so yeah, office, we're talking about office. So I think we're all well aware of the, rise of work from home. New office construction is minimal and will likely not be successful at the waterfront. And although our team did see that rent is above market average right now, it's actually expected to flatten over the next several years. Industrial. So light or flex industrial or makerspace is quite feasible along the waterfront, especially light industrial that has a retail or public facing component like a brewery or a coffee roaster. There's also the opportunity with light industrial to add jobs and still be compatible with existing and future waterfront uses. We have noted that a challenge here is that there is a potential for increased truck traffic, which we should, be taking into consideration as we go along the planning process. Civic space. So civic open and event space in particular could be a real draw for local development. High quality parks with community spaces and amenities could really not only incentivize development, but help draw people to the river and serve as a kind of needed green infrastructure element to mitigate things like erosion and flood events, which we know are real kind of issues for all riverfront communities right now. And the biggest challenge here is really kind of working with steep slopes and existing access issues to make sure any kind of large civic green space is ADA compliant, is well connected. And that's really fundamentally what's going to make a space like that successful. So making sure we get that right if that is a space that ends up being proposed in one or all of the districts. And lastly, hospitality. West Linn and the waterfront are unlikely to sustain a traditional hotel that sort of caters to business or vacation travelers. However, a destination or specialty hospitality could be feasible. So hospitality, so by that I mean like hospitality that offers a unique or kind of personalized experience. We're showing at the bottom right McMenamin's Kalama Harbor Lodge, which is really an example of the kind of hospitality model that might be feasible for the waterfront. So hospitality that's paired with like an event, well-known event venue or restaurant with waterfront views, things like that. So that's a really kind of quick overview of key takeaways. This section's only these two spreads. So yeah, I'm going to pause for questions here. All right, looks like we got a few. I think I saw maybe Jim up first.
Well, I read through your market study, and I thought it was conservative. And an example of that is the Vancouver waterfront, which was a prior paper mill, and it's also on the shores of the Columbia River. So it's in some ways it's similar to this location. And in 2018, there were no buildings on that site. And today, I would guess, I just rode through there this morning, and I would guess there was probably 5 million square feet of buildings on that 32 acres today. And I worked there from 2015 to 2020, and I was the waterfront director for the developer. And there was no viable market for anything there in 2016. And the land values were that the appraisers were coming up with was around $50 a square foot. And now those sites are selling for over $200 a square foot. So I think things can change dramatically, especially if you have a a destination type of location like we do in West Linn. So I just wanted to point out that example. And,
Thank you.
there are 2 hotels in Vancouver and 1 office building. There are approximately 18 restaurants, 13 of which opened up in the first 2 years. And part of the driver at Vancouver was the fact that Washington has a sales tax and Oregon doesn't. So all the retail is occurring on the Oregon side, and very little or no retail is incorporated into the Vancouver waterfront. But the number of restaurants there is kind of staggering in a way, and those include probably 6 or 7 wine tasting shops.
Jim, thanks for that feedback, and we can certainly take that back to Leland and try to get their take on a couple of those other case studies as well. I know Vancouver's one, and there's others. We should also just make sure that we're double checking those assumptions.
Greg was had his hand up next.
Yeah, I had a question just about the contrast between the market analysis and its discussion of building on the floodplains, and then the actual kind of at least the prospective plans for what would happen for the pond redevelopment area. And was wondering, like, to what extent is the market analysis kind of dependent upon building on the flood, on the pond redevelopment, and is most of the market analysis really kind of premised upon areas that are in higher elevation? I'm just particularly concerned about, just given the frequency of major flooding on the Columbia, on the Willamette historically, and the likelihood of increased flooding in the future.
I think, I mean, we'll take that question back to give a proper answer on that. But my understanding is that the assumptions of the market analysis are both, like they've looked at both the higher elevation opportunities as well as opportunities for building in the floodplain, assuming certain things with the ponds in those areas.
And I'll just add that something we talked about a lot as a team was the idea of a civic institutional space approach that really looks at green infrastructure as the fundamental framework of that program element. So designed to flood. So that in particular was a program area that we thought a lot about in terms of the floodplain. We talked a little bit about housing in terms of that, you know, in floodplain areas, we would not recommend putting housing on the ground floor. And then, you know, industrial spaces, we know that there's a lot of desire and opportunity to repurpose and reuse some of the industrial infrastructure in the cultural heritage district. And there is like a kind of design to flood. There are examples and typologies of that happening. But yeah, it's definitely something we're going to need to dig into further as we develop options. Oh, Greg, I think you're on mute.
I was just concerned about just insurance for folks who might have commercial establishments on the first floor, if that insurance becomes increasingly difficult to actually access.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. That's absolutely a consideration, and it is more difficult.
Thanks.
And John.
If I could just pipe in for 1 second here. I just want to recognize a few people that have joined us since we got started. John George of the Grand Ronde has joined the meeting, as has Julie Hernandez of PGE. So I just wanted to recognize and welcome them to the group, and I'll step back again. So thank you.
And I think this is John George. So I think our IS and my computer are not WebEx friendly, so I had to work. So I apologize for being late, and I think this is my first meeting with the group, and I want to thank Council President Mary Baumgardner too for the invitation to join you all too, and I look forward to our future meetings. It's almost like Groundhog Day for me. We're going through the same thing across the river for you, so like that too. So I think that I love this because it's I love the visions of moving forward with that too, and how each of us can look at the economics for the area and tourism and stuff for this area. So I think these are great projects and stuff too, and I look forward to seeing them both come to fruition there too. So thank you, and thank you for welcoming too to the group. I look forward to many more conversations and stuff too. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Okay, well, I will keep going. That was kind of a wrap for the market analysis. Any other questions before we move on?
I think there is still a couple of
Oh,
hands. Andrew,
oh,
sorry.
okay. Yeah, no.
John is down. I think, Jim, did you have another comment?
Well, I just wanted to make sure that I said the right thing, which is when I referred to $50, I was talking about square feet. I might have said acres, and that moved from $50 per square foot to $200 a square foot.
Wow. Yeah. That's great context, and it's really, I mean, we've been looking at Vancouver and the Vancouver waterfront, so to learn a little bit more about that is great. Okay, so let's move on to the district planning section. This is the last chapter. This is the section where we sort of bring it all together. Really sort of the most important chapter of the entire document. Could potentially stand alone if needed. Kind of has everything we've worked up to until now, and creates a path of how we're moving forward and how we're looking for feedback. So the first page here is outlining our approach to planning for each of the districts. And that's really kind of overlaying the planning framework from chapter 2, the market analysis from chapter 3, with previous community feedback that the city received during engagement efforts from 2016 to 2019. So really putting those kind of 3 pools together to come up with an overall identity and character of each district. The identity and the character is really kind of the basis for context-sensitive planning and land use decisions. With that, we're also producing a sort of prioritization of the guiding principles, which is really dictated by the opportunities and needs of each district. And then finally, a suite of potential programs, which we're really in this next phase of engagement trying to hone in on and get feedback from the community. Program ideas for each district are organized by type and include sort of four categories: parks and recreation space, cultural and commercial space, housing, and parking. And within each of these program types, we're also trying to answer some fundamental or kind of bigger questions. So I'll give you like a few examples. So within parks and recreation, are we aiming for more active and programmed or passive open spaces? What is the diversity and intensity of uses desired for cultural and commercial spaces in each district? What is the appropriate scale and density of housing, if any, for each district? And lastly, how does the community feel about parking, public parking, that is? Is there more of a centralized approach we should take, perhaps with structured garages? Or is there a more dispersed, lighter touch approach through the inclusion of parking fields? Or should it really be a mix of both? And that's really kind of what we're trying to get answers to in this next engagement phase. So again, to put that another way, what we're going to be asking the community is, one, are you in agreement for what we're saying the identity and character of these districts is and should be? And what are the ideal scenarios for each district in terms of the ratio of active and passive open areas, diversity and intensity of commercial space, housing, and parking? So that's kind of the big picture. That's like what we're doing here. And after we kind of go through this initial page outlining the approach, we dive into each district, and each district is going to have 3 spreads. And I'm going to go through these relatively quickly now, but we'll come back and have a sort of more of a focused discussion after I hop through these. But before I do that, I'm going to pause for questions again, because that was a bit of information. All right, seeing none, I will continue. So again, for each district, we have an overview of each of those key overlays: the planning framework, previous community input, the market analysis, the district approach, and sort of that guiding principles breakdown. So this is followed by a spread that kind of graphically illustrates some of those ideas and the kind of character or experiential quality we're getting at for each district, which is illustrated on the left by a precedent image. We've also included some pull quotes here from community feedback, and then the planning framework is on the right. The third page is really all about programming. So what you see here are all suggestions for the Historic City Hall District, broken again down by those categories: program categories, parks and rec space, cultural and commercial, housing, and public parking. And again, like, these are not meant to be solidified program ideas that we are saying it's this or this. It's this or this. This is really to start a conversation about the kind of, again, scale, intensity of uses, character and quality of the programmatic types that we want for each district, or that the community wants for each district. I'll just note here, housing and public parking is pretty much consistent in options between districts, looking at sort of everything from townhomes to low-rise to mid-rise, and parking, again, kind of bringing these ideas forward of structured versus surface or field parking. And I'll click through the rest of the districts here. Same format: cultural heritage district. Again, the sort of illustrative image on the left, the planning framework on the right, and a mix of potential programs. And the Pond Redevelopment District last. And again, a mix of potential programs. So that's this section. I think it would be great to spend a little bit more time digging into some of the actual programs that we've suggested for these districts and get your feedback, or kind of open up the discussion for anything else you want to talk about. But I think, you know, it would be really valuable for you guys, the experts and the kind of key stakeholders for this project, to let us know if we were asking the right questions here in terms of programmatic mix, if there's things you've thought about or heard about for these areas that you really think we should bring forward as a suggestion for a district. So just keeping that in mind as we open that up for discussion. So this is really kind of an open discussion time. Feel free to ask me questions, or Adrian, or John, or, you know, if you want to zoom in on a district and talk a little bit more specifically about the programs we're recommending for it, we can do that. Yeah. Looks like Jeff, you have your hand up.
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
So as a suggestion, I can't see it now on the screen here, but one thing that's come to my mind is, if everyone's familiar with the area of Tualatin, by the Legacy Meridian Hospital. They built Stafford Hills Country Club a few years ago, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, and it was kind of in a wetlandy area. And it seemed at the time like, should they be building this here? But it's a country club that has tennis courts, swimming pools. It's become very popular. I would say it's quite a successful operation. And that area kind of resembles the lower pond area there, the pond district. So I just wanted to use that as sort of an example of something that seems to have worked in a similar locale.
It's great. Thanks, Jeff. Mary?
Thank you. I would like to just keep in mind and advocate for natural spaces and preservation of biodiversity in an important area that represents the overlapping of different habitats. There's always more biodiversity in overlapping the Venn diagram, so to speak, of different. So there's the river and then the land, and then at the riparian zone, that's where a lot of biodiversity can happen. And so I would like to just keep in mind as we're planning, and I hear a lot of language that comforts me that we're keeping that somewhat in mind, but I just want to make sure that that's contained in our plan. And also I'd like to advocate for tribal voices to be listened to, and the cultural heritage of the prior peoples and how they use these spaces to be considered as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Kyle.
Hi, I just wanted to say that what you've presented is consistent with the things we've been looking at with Belgravia on the property. I would, though, share with you that some of the challenges with the property are, Willamette Falls Drive passing through it, and just its width and speed of how to slow it down, how to maybe create layers of pedestrian scale so that it makes it more pedestrian friendly. And then on the other side, we've got the cliff. So we're really squeezed in there, and just having a really good understanding of that cross section of that right of way as it's coming through all of these districts is going to be really important. So thank you.
Great point. Greg.
I just had a comment about the absence of any reference to the locks in the cultural and historic section. It seems like they're a really valuable asset that ought to be acknowledged more. And, recreationally as well, in terms of, like in the past, kayakers and canoeists could actually go through the locks from one side of, the upper falls to the lower falls, which is a really fascinating resource to have as well, looking to the future. So I would encourage you to include more information about the locks.
I think that's a good point, Greg, and we have been talking as a team also about that opportunity in particular being potentially a fairly early stage win. Obviously once those locks are upgraded and transferred. But thank you for recognizing that.
Jim.
I just wanted to second what Greg said. I looked up I was thinking about the locks and the property around the locks. But it's somewhat similar to the Hiram Chittenden locks up in Ballard in Seattle. And I looked that up, and it's one of the most popular tourist attractions in Seattle, and it gets about 2 million visitors a year. And then what was kind of curious to me about that was that you can't really touch the water there, but you can be close to it, and you can see the activity. that's associated with. So I agree with Greg that the for a tourist attraction, we not only have the falls, which are pretty incredible, but we have the locks, and we have a combination of those two features. So I think that's a really critical component to consider.
Yeah, another great example too. Thanks. We'll have to look up the ones in Seattle. John.
Thank you. And I apologize too. I know I have a 2:00 too, but I think being part of this is very important to me also. So I want you to know that, and I really appreciate Mary bringing in the tribal voices too. But I look at it more of like an opportunity for education too, and also education around native plants and stuff too, that and their uses and stuff too. So like signage and stuff. And I truly though, and so Jim have really hit the good points about what there is a locks that's coming there for reasons for people also, and also I think the view of the falls. I think people have been missing the falls for probably 150 years. Some people didn't even know falls even existed there. And so and also just to also disclose too, also because I am a Grand Round Tribal Council member, or here on as part of my thing here, but I also sit on the Willamette Falls Landings Heritage Area Coalition, which is also part of the Historic City Hall project also from there. And so I did, just to disclose that for people that do, but I really do look at it. So I love the marina look of that for a marina, because it is on a river. Have a lot of travel there just even by that, and with the locks and stuff too. Very important for falls view, but also opportunities to be by the river and stuff too. Because I think and I appreciate Jim talking about too the Vancouver waterfront project too, because I don't see like a lot of businesses that are actually literally on the river and stuff too. Because I've been to some, I think we had an event. I sit on the Native Chamber board too over here, and they had an event at one of those winery things and stuff too. And I noticed that you have to pretty much travel by foot, or bike or stuff to actually get to the waterfront and stuff too. So I think I love some of these examples you have in your pictures under the cultural heritage district thing about that, looking like where people can actually almost feel like they're right on the water, and stuff too, and then close. But and then as we talk about too though, and then like this little pond redevelopment picture that's on there too and everything, great places for hiking and the bike path or something too. But really I think like that, the cultural knowledge of that, where our Clackamas people villages and stuff were close there, and a lot of the village sites that they're along the river that too. So it gives opportunity for that, for education, and also I think for education on native plants and stuff too, that are to Oregon and stuff too, or to the area and stuff too, because you got Camisea up on the bluff and stuff too, where Camas was a very important food source and stuff too, and a trade item there around the falls and stuff too. So I appreciate it, and of course the great history of the falls of being the second largest falls in the nation by volume. So too, so I think there's great opportunities here to really attract, and great tourism venue and development for that. So thank you, appreciate it, and these meetings are important to me. I don't want you to feel like that, but getting on late, leaving early, so too. So our schedule just it's like that. So, and I think I've got WebEx downloaded, I think, for the app, so it won't take me so long to get on next time too. So I appreciate this and appreciate and honored to have the opportunity. part of this great project here on the other side of the river also. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, John.
Thank you. I think I'm hearing so much about, we're all hearing so much about what great amenities exist and what great natural amenities exist along the riverfront. And I think that's what's so special about this site. A lot of industrialized waterfronts looking to develop a master plan don't have that. There's a lot of remediation that needs to be done. They're, making man-made wetlands because there aren't any that exist today. And the fact that those already exist on the site is a really wonderful thing, and definitely something that is fundamental to the framework of planning, which, I think is being reflected by all of your comments here. So, Leo.
I want to applaud the idea of a marina. It's a commercial focus. There's also a lot of commercial activity around a marina. Boat parts are sold. Typically, there's a restaurant. There can be a lot of activity, and it can be a destination as well. Also, another resource we have there is some interesting industrial archaeology. I don't know if that's everyone's interest, but it's mine and some people. So one of the first hydroelectric plants was right there. And if some sort of tours of that could be made available, that would be extremely interesting to a lot of people. And even the paper making process, which is part of our history, would be of interest to some people. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm not sure who J-Man is. I'm sorry, but they have their hand up.
Yep. Yeah, sorry, it's James Manning.
Oh, okay, got it. Hi, James.
All right. Well, thank you. On this, I like everything that I see on this plan. We do have some. I have some questions about housing. I do like the idea of retail on the bottom floor, housing on the top floor, but you reference high-end housing, and in this state of our nation, our community, I don't think we need more high-end housing. As Jim pointed out in Vancouver, at the beginning of the project, it was approximately $50 a square foot. Now it's $200 a square foot. That's very conducive into making money if you're a developer, but it's not conducive into having, I don't want to say low income housing, but moderately priced housing in this project.
Thanks, James. And I apologize if I said high end at some point. I don't think we don't want to be suggesting that's the only kind, or that's the primary kind of housing that we would be suggesting here. I think.
Yeah, you didn't say that today, but it's written in the document. So.
Oh, okay. Okay, we should flag that. I don't think we want that in there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for letting me. Yeah, with everything that every city in the state of Oregon is trying to do, infill, ADUs, things like that, I think it gives kind of a bad image of all we're going to do is build high-end housing in West Linn.
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want that message. Yeah.
Hey, come on, it is West Linn too. I didn't think there would be anything less. No, I just can't. I live in Gresham, so
yeah. And then the second point I had, that Councillor Baumgartner had brought up with wetlands and things like that. I have the advantage of knowing what some of this property looked like before the ponds were there. Those wetlands aren't naturally occurring. A lot of those were man-made because we put a large dike around the pond, and it forced water into certain areas. So as much as I want to say that we want to maintain or repair wetlands, which I do want to say that, some of those wetlands were man-made after 1970. So
that's interesting background. I personally didn't know that. Thanks.
Yeah. So like 4th Avenue behind the Blue Heron Pond, all that wetlands used to be a farm, used to have cows, they used to grow hay. And, you know, to back that up, there's still remnants of their old barns and outbuildings and things like that in the middle of a lake that a beaver has created, which I think is kind of cool that the beaver has created that. But to say those are natural would be incorrect.
Okay. Good to know. Thank you. Looks like Jim. It's his hand up.
I just want to make sure I was not muted, but my reference to the value of the land was really just an illustration of demand rather than advocating for a high cost of value or the value of the land. The other point I wanted to make, and I think it's pretty obvious to everybody on this call, but we have three distinctly different types of land, essentially. We have solid rock that's almost vertical, which has some really interesting vegetation on it, the oak trees and moss and other plants. And then we have the relatively flat land that we've been referring to as the ponds, which could be more affordable, although it affordable to build on, although it probably would require fill, which is expensive. And then you have the third type, which is the mill, the structures on the mill, which I'm very much an advocate of reusing those for something. It could be, use your imagination. It could be all kinds of things, hotels, parking garages, office space, restaurants, and so on. But I just wanted to point out that the difference in those in terms of planning and thinking in terms of structures. To build anything on the steep slopes that are rocky, if it's sidewalks, as streets or buildings, it's going to be complicated, and it's probably going to be small footprints. Even if it's a micro park, it's going to be small. And so I just think it's important to recognize the difference in the types of thinking or planning and structures that you might put on those or uses that you might kinds of land.
Yeah, that's a great point. Really good point. James, did you have another thought, or is your hand up from previous comment?
My other thought was, you know, I didn't want to put Jim on the spot with the $50 to $200 as a baseline of what the property is. My point of that is, before the property becomes too expensive to develop into moderately priced housing, I think it should be planned that way.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, seeing no hands up. Adrian, I will pass it back to you.
Great. Excellent. So just wanted to spend a couple of minutes. Oh, sorry, Leo, I see your hands up. Is that deliberate?
Yes, there's redevelopment occurring across the Willamette River. And I'm just wondering to what extent we are coordinating or even are aware of what they're doing.
Yeah, great
Are there
question
any
and a great
synergies?
segue, actually. So I know that John's new to the meeting group, but we have actually been I have had some discussions with the development arm of the tribes to talk through, you know, where everything is at with the Tumwater Village site. So we are coordinating with them. We'll keep and we'll keep doing that over time as their plans start to develop. and we had some good discussion there around, you know, what are some you know, mutually beneficial opportunities. One, for example, is a really clear desire for any future ped bike bridge, like the ODOT ped bike bridge, to coordinate between these two sites, and in particular, more the southern alignment that's on the falls side of the river, that would connect both sites to each other. So, you know, things like that, where there are those mutual opportunities, or potentially river access, where you've got maybe a portage trail between the two sites and things like that. So I think there are some really great opportunities there, and we'll make sure that we're continuing to keep those discussions open as they get their plans in more solid form.
I like the idea of a bike pedestrian bridge across the river.
Yeah. And John, you've got your physical hand up, so I'm going to hand this over to you for a sec.
So, and I really appreciate that too, because yeah, I mean, we've had to go through all the environmental stuff, you know, studies and feasibility, and then we're in the demolition stage to get those done. We would like to also see a river walk type of thing, but I do too. I love the idea of a connecting either, you know, bike ped bridge. My also vision would like to see too is like some type of platform in the middle of that, because the best view I think is if you stand in the middle of the arch bridge is probably your best view of the falls, and if you could have that a little bit closer, that would even be nice too, to be able to do that, and also or like looking at that river walk. And but right now, so we haven't I think we're still working on the master plan also for that too, because as things change and so too, so that we have our discussions and our pictures almost look the same as yours. That's why I said it looks like Groundhog Day here, because it's like so. Even though I'm not saying I'm not the expert here either, too, but we have because we have engineer on staff, and our chief of staff is also they're our lead people overseeing that. So probably look forward to kind of more of a closer finalized master plan and stuff for that too, because we do have the like ideas of plaza areas. We want to create more of a natural environment too, to along the river, and creating inlets and stuff too, to you know, to help with the salmon migrating and stuff too, to rest and stuff too, and because we do have to, you know, worry about predation and stuff there too with the sea lions. And so we also want to find areas for them to be able to protect the salmonoids and the eels and stuff too, going upriver to kind of protect them. And I know, and I've had a friend who lives along in West Linn too, who had a boat dock and stuff too, and she says those sea lions just destroyed their dock. They've had to rebuild their dock and stuff from before, because they're not little animals, and so, or mammals, I guess we would call them, but they have destroyed their dock and stuff too by that. So you know, those things. So we have look to the close future for a master plan. Yes, because we're looking at some of the same stuff, and that's why I said, and how West Linn and Grand Ron are great partners, so too, and good friends. So we look forward to all of that and creating this wonderful opportunity for tourism and economics for the area. So thank you. You know, and I'm getting looks too for me because I'm still late in my other meeting. so I apologize that I do have to jump off real quick. But I was thinking, so then, and Anjali, are you going to send out a copy of the presentation, or did you already? I'm sorry, because that's.
Yeah, and maybe I can cover that quickly. We will get a version. Well, has been a version of this report sent out already, but we can forward that again, as well as you know, our timeline coming up. So we're looking at getting comments from this group by next week, so that we can finalize this draft by the end of the year. So John, I know you have to jump off, so that's sort of the, in a nutshell, next steps that we need from the group.
Okay, I appreciate that, and so I can get back with you too and stuff too, but great presentation. I really appreciate it, and I apologize if I don't get to see the end of it either. So that's kind of why I was asking if we get a copy of this. But you sent it out, so did it come from you, Adrian? Or?
It would have come from Linn, but we'll make sure that it gets sent out again with a reminder.
I really appreciate it.
Great.
Send that back out over to you. So
great. I see Councillor Baumgartner's got a hand up as well.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to also thank John. I know he's got a very busy schedule for being able to be here, and I appreciated his comments, especially about the salmon and lamprey, because that's another important point that I had thought about for potential funding. If we are doing any restoration, having funding coming from, I'm not, Fish and Wildlife. I'm not sure who the different bodies are that help with restoration that would help salmon and lamprey habitat, but that's another potential that we could keep in mind to help us do maybe some of the cleanup, and maybe even partner with, I know Bob Schultz isn't on the call today, or I haven't seen him here yet, but if that's something that we could even partner with, as he's a private property owner, because that cleanup isn't, of course, something that happened while he owned the property. It's possible even that Water Environmental Services could help with some of that, because they were a property owner for a period of time. So those are just some of the things, because I think funding is going to be an issue with that cleanup, potentially. Thank you.
Great.
And if I may too, because that's things. Thank you, Mary, for that too. Also, because we've also put our own money in for the lamprey studies. The word is skokwol in our language for and stuff too. And so we've done studies on that. We've also put money into for a salmon initiative too and stuff too. And we've hired a consultant and stuff too. So working on the salmon, and also like even part of like dam removals and stuff too for fish passage in the dams and stuff too, because I'll tell you, our salmon are getting close to the extinction, I'll say, and stuff too. So if we don't do things quickly here, we could be losing one of our greatest resources and stuff too, for especially for Native people, but for even the economy and stuff too. So we've actually really had to, we put money where it was needed to help this, instead of we couldn't wait around. So on those things and stuff too. So I thank you, Mary, for that too and everything. So we'll continue that work too. And I appreciate everybody too. And I apologize I have to go.
No problem. All right, let's wrap up this item. I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes just talking about what our next steps on community engagement are. And Andrew, if you have those slides, thank you. So you would have seen this schedule or this phasing diagram for the master plan process at our last meeting. So with the community vision, the draft community vision, we'll be looking to finalize that by the end of the year, and then start to take it out to public engagement in the first quarter of the new year. And Anju sort of went through some of the things that we're looking to get from that feedback. Feedback on district character, land use, programming, and some of those other key decisions. I've also just included on this diagram what happens after that. So after that, we'll be taking that input and sort of looking at preferred land use plans and what that means for implementation strategies and zoning changes and the like. And that's phase 2, which also has a public engagement component. And then lastly, as we get more into the development of code and policy updates that are needed to enact the master plan, which is phase 3, we'll also go out and have a community engagement process to allow public comment on those documents. So that's just to show you sort of the broader scheme of how public consultation fits into the process at a very high level. On the next slide, it shows you who we're engaging. And we've sort of broken this into two groups. One is stakeholders, part of which you are all a part of, and the stakeholders are really intended to help guide the development of the document. So as well as yourselves, the project working group, we also are forming a technical advisory committee that will include, you know, for example, Oregon City, TriMet, DOT, and other sort of technical advisors that might need to come into some of the implementation-based work that we're looking at in the next phases. And then we've also got some space to update decision-making bodies in the city. So that's council, planning commission, historic review board, and the like. We also have the public that we want to get feedback from. So I'll show you in a minute sort of some of the ways that we're thinking of doing that engagement, but we're trying to reach out to the public in general that sort of go to the site or through the site currently, as well as others that might use it in the future. In particular, trying to really focus in on going to people where they gather. So trying to get in touch with those sort of more hard to reach people that don't typically engage. And then obviously through John and Andrew, coordinating with local tribes for outreach to those groups specifically. And then I've also listed here civic organizations. So there'll be opportunity to get out to you know, the neighborhood association meetings, youth advisory council, those sorts of folks. On the next slide, just quickly around how we're going to be engaging folks. So we have a draft public engagement plan, which we'll probably go through another iteration just to make sure that we're hitting the right points in terms of what we're asking for. But some of the in-person events that we're looking at, we'll hold some tabling events where there are already community gatherings happening. We'll have a meeting in a box that allows us to get out to places where people gather, such as grocery stores or coffee shops and other places. We have these project working group meetings, the technical advisory group meetings, coordination with the tribes, as I mentioned, and also an opportunity to get out and do civic presentations and presentations to other groups and decision maker bodies. We'll also have a virtual presence. So we're creating a project website currently. So that's in draft and that'll be launched in the new year. As part of that, there'll be sort of an online presence that allows people to submit their feedback that way, as well as a updated frequently asked questions list that will update regularly based on what we hear back throughout the engagement process. And then lastly, just some space for people to connect virtually through an open house that can be recorded and then uploaded to the website so that folks can access it there. So those are some of the activities that we've got planned for public and stakeholder engagement coming up, just so you know where we're headed with all this in the new year. Any questions on that? I know we're running short of time, so if there are brief questions, I'm happy to answer them. And Kathy, I think you have your hand up.
I would like to make a suggestion that you move your neighborhood associations from the civic organizations to the decision-making body category, because it was many of the neighborhood associations that changed what the original project was to look like, and this would have been in 2017, 2018, 2019, and morphed it into more like what it is now. And it was the neighborhood associations that did that. So you might want to put them into the decision-making bodies category.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions. James, I also have the next agenda item, which is looking at our next meeting and next steps. If you don't mind, I can take that now.
Continue, thank you.
Great. So just on the next slide, just outlining what's coming up for this group. So as I mentioned, we'll be recirculating the draft of the vision plan that Andrew presented here today. So take your time going through that and get comments back to John by end of day next week, next Thursday. And then we'll be finalising the draft vision plan based on your feedback today and those comments that you sent through by the end of the year. Public engagement, as I mentioned, starting in the first quarter of next year. And then in terms of this group coming together, I think we will take a hiatus in January, just because it's hard to coordinate folks. It would have been, I think, the 4th of January. So we won't have a lot of additional information to present at that stage, but we will circulate a final vision plan. So you're welcome to provide comment back on that document virtually. And then we'll reconvene in February to talk through, how public engagement's going and provide an update on that process at that meeting. So that's the upcoming schedule here. James, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. Well, thank you very much. This was very, very good today. I appreciate everybody's input. The next thing on the agenda is more public comment. Is there anyone else that would like to say anything before we close the meeting out? And I'm sorry, I can't see anybody's hands from Taiwan today. So if John or Lynn could let me know.
Oh, go ahead.
There's one member of the group, Jeff Cohn, has his hand raised. So
Just real quick, at the start of the meeting, John, you had mentioned that there were several people that have now changed on who's in this group. And I was wondering if you could provide an updated list with the correct names now.
yes, I can do that. Yes, I'll send that out to the group.
No rush on that. It's nice to know when I'm in these meetings, when I see the names, I can refer back to that list. Thank you very much.
Absolutely, yes.
Okay, with no other public comment, we can adjourn this meeting at 2:27. And
Thanks, everyone.
And thank you again, everybody, for your input today.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.